Hi, I'm John Hodgson. Welcome to the Teesside Band Archive Local Heroes podcast, episode 3. On each podcast, I chat to a local musician, songwriter or band members, asking them about their songwriting, their recording methods, and a little of what inspired them to make music in the first place. We'll hear songs by their musical heroes, about who influenced them, and they will be playing live right here at Imperial Digital with some exclusive performances. My special guest for the third podcast is Andy Mitchell, a singer-songwriter who has gone further than just guitar and voice, as he also creates mood pieces that fuse electronica and avant-garde, often alongside passionate vocals that remind me at least of Radiohead's Tom York. Andy Mitchell, welcome.
Thank you very much for that introduction. That was
pretty accurate.
Yeah, I'm honoured that you would say, that sounded like Tom York. That's a privilege that you would say that. Yeah.
Right, Andy Mitchell. In 2008, which was, I suppose, more or less when things started for you musically, would you say?
Yeah, I had been trying to teach myself how to play guitar, not taking it too seriously at the time. I was just kind of basically using chords from songs that I liked and wanted to try and play them if I could, and that's kind of started me off on the guitar. And then in 2008, I was the end of my university. You get to your final project, and that's going to be towards your dissertation and your eventual grade, basically.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because I've got here that inspired by Springsteen's Lo-Fi Nebraska album, you decided to do an album as a dissertation. And in addition to that, you wanted something a little bit more, and you decided to try and create a new way of consuming music by mixing a cinema experience with a planetarium.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit about that process?
Springsteen's Nebraska album, I'd been listening to that, extensively. And when you get into an album, you want to find out more about it and you read up about it. And I came across the information on how he went about recording it. And, it just come out of making Born in the USA, and that was, his huge success.
Yeah.
So he was trying to dial it back a bit, and he just started making songs in his bedroom, basically on a 4-track that then he was going to flesh out in the studio. But these demos that he made in his bedroom were what eventually became the album. So finding that out kind of made me a lot more open to the idea of, well, I've got this time for this university project. If I'm gonna really go for it, then I should do something that I enjoy doing as well. So that was what expanded into, if we've got an album, what makes it different? What can you do to make it something that's putting something different out there, rather than here I am, I've got an album as well, differently. So that developed into, well, there's not really an experience for listening to a new album that's kind of taking in the visuals, the experience, the kind of taking you somewhere, because an album has that kind of almost, if it's a good album for 40, 50 minutes, however long it is. So that kind of blended into, well, what would happen if you, made like a planetarium type environment where you can lay back and the visuals that are surrounding you in a kind of all above your head environment.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the kind of thing that Pink Floyd would do.
Yeah, sure. It was very much inspired by that type of people, like Pink Floyd, people like Radiohead, that do try and incorporate visuals, and The Wall, the movie, is a perfect example of visuals as well as music.
Okay, well, that's interesting. You say in your biog that you sent me that the method of selling music for the artist in the world of the internet is dead in the water. The reason you give is that almost all the music that's ever been created is available to anyone free at the click of a mouse.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, whether that's true or not, it doesn't make it right, does it?
No, it doesn't. I mean, depending on what side of the fence you fall down on when it comes to piracy, the fact is that the music business and how we consume music is changed. And, record labels have been trying to hold on to their way that has worked for the past 40, 50 years. Obviously, they don't want to let that go because it's a business. They want to make money. So when something comes along like Napster and LimeWire back in the day, and those things started to change how people could get a hold of music. And then from there, obviously, at today, I mean, if you've got internet connection, you are literally, 10 seconds away from literally, any album that you can think of.
Yeah, I mean, the bands are going through a lot of growing pains at the moment, trying to monetize their careers. I think the whole interaction between artist and fan is changed, as we all realise now, and I think everybody's coming to terms with it. Okay, enough chat for the minute. I want to get some music down. The first influence that you gave me was Radiohead, which I think we've briefly mentioned before. Yeah. The song you've chosen is I Might Be Wrong. What is it about the music that inspires you?
I just love the atmosphere that they can create with varying sounds, and they're so fearless in the way that they approach how they make albums and songs.
So, following on from your experiences at uni, you started work on learning how to master drum programming, bass guitar, keyboard, synths, blending them in to make your own music. Yeah. Was it a steep learning curve? Did you sort of have an intense period of learning how to do this?
I'd always been into being creative. I always wanted to feel like I could approach anything I wanted to if it was... There's basically a quote that kind of called the Book of Five Rings.
Right. Nothing to do with Lord of the Rings.
No. And it's once you know the way broadly, you can see it in all things. And that's kind of the philosophy that I kind of took, where it was, if you've taken the steps to one area, whether it's sport or whether it's learning guitar or drawing, or when they've got the steps in place, you can move those steps and apply them to anything else. So once I started the ball rolling on guitar, I could see, okay, if you put the time in and you know the eventual steps to getting better, you just have to put that in. So I knew the steps and could then work it to bass, work it to how learning keyboards, work it to learning whatever was in the way.
So it's basically a method of learning something, and once you apply it to anything, you can maybe make some progress. Talking of excellence, your first hero that you've mentioned is Jimi Hendrix. The song you chose, in my opinion, it's the greatest rock guitar performance ever put onto vinyl.
It's amazing.
It sounds to me like it's just one guitar. I mean, I've listened to it closely on headphones many times, and it just sounds like one guitar. Whether they've edited in takes, but I can't see more than one guitar. I mean, it goes from speaker to speaker. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
What is it about Hendrix that turns you on? I mean, it's an obvious answer question, really. His guitar playing.
I'm always in the back of my mind when I'm approaching learning something, I'm always aware of that to master something it takes 10,000 hours, and he always epitomized to me someone that had reached that kind of mastery of guitar. And if you watch him, it's just like, it's mesmerizing to watch, because you can see that he doesn't have to put any thought whatsoever into what he's doing with the guitar. His eyes are closed and he's kind of twitching, and it's like he's just receiving a signal straight through him. It's not like it's almost like he's not even present.
Yeah, I mean, there's many stories you read, if you read his biographies, about how he went to sleep with his guitar. He'd wake up and it'd be there next to him.
Yeah.
And it was basically an extension of his being, really.
Yeah.
And it's no better demonstrated, I don't think, with Voodoo Child, Slight Return. This is Jimi Hendrix with Voodoo Child. The music on your first EP, entitled Of Nature and Minimal Means, that draws inspiration, you say, from cosmology and the mysteries and wonders of the universe. How do you go about translating that kind of influence into sounds?
It kind of goes back to what I was saying about how you can utilize images and how that translates into an emotional response, and how that translates into what you're trying to achieve with the music. So, a good piece of music will take you somewhere. So if you're trying to take in some of the wonder of the universe and what's going on in the sky and where we are in the universe, and from there all these different spiraling ideas in my head, that's what the frame of mind I try and put myself into if I'm trying to achieve, something that's like you're in space, and that when I say that, it's like kind of that. The Joshua Tree is a really good album where there's songs on there where the streets have no name, that kind of intro that you can't really put your finger on why, but to me it feels like that kind of staring out into the wonder of space type feeling.
Yeah, I mean, I know you two get knocked and Bono gets knocked, but for me, they're one of the most important bands in rock and roll. I mean, the fact that they've been at the top of their game since 1980 into the present day, I won't have anything said against U2. I mean, I know a lot of people seem to be very, cynical about them nowadays, particularly. But for me, there's only one album of theirs that they've made a misstep, and that was the Pop album.
Yeah.
I didn't really get that one. Okay, well, we're lucky enough. You've agreed to do 3 songs for us tonight, and the first song we'll hear now is called Bang Bang.
His hand was steady as he fired the gun. He put 2 in the chest, another for fun. But he didn't see a choice when he opened the door. He found his best friend with his girl on the floor. You're going down, a bang bang. You're going down, a bang bang. And they all soon found out that the world is surreal if love isn't what you feel. Two naked bodies lay face down on the rug. The gunshots won't stop pouring with blood. But with one last breath, this girl goes wild. I'm pregnant and it was your child. You're going down, a bang bang. You're going down, a bang bang. And they all soon found out that the world is surreal if love isn't what you feel. And this'll all keep rolling on. You can't stop a black swan before it's born. And this'll all keep rolling on. You can't stop a black swan before it's born. You're going down, a bang bang. You're going down, a bang bang. And they all soon found out that the world is surreal if love isn't what you feel.
There we go. That was Andy Mitchell with Bang Bang, one of the first of 3 songs that he's going to do for us on this podcast. You followed up the EP of Nature and Minimal Means with an album called The Well-Travelled Road, which you say came from a difficult place for you emotionally. What was it that informed the album?
Well, basically my girlfriend had broke up with me,
Right.
which is, it's difficult to listen back to the songs just because, I sound so whiny and defeated and pessimistic, and I know where I was at that time, and looking back when you're not feeling like the world's just ended and you're useless and it's difficult to look back, but that's sometimes where some of the best heartfelt music comes from, I guess. So
Well, you wouldn't be the first or the last singer-songwriter or musician to use a breakup as part of an inspiration. I mean, I think that's pretty much... and I mean, I think part of the trick is to make the lyrics that you present as being personal. Maybe other people could see something and put it to their own situation. I mean, love and loss is universal.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes one of the best things about say sad music or music that kind of evokes that kind of heartbreak is it kind of lets you know someone else is feeling that, or someone else has been there, or someone else is understanding, and it's important that someone else is out there feeling the same way sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's all very sweet, isn't it? Talking about nice sweetness and light, your next influence track is Black Sabbath. The track is Lord of This World from the Masters of Reality album, which is one of their classic early albums. What is it about Black Sabbath that turns you on so much?
Well, the album Master of Reality is definitely one of my favourite albums, just because of the sheer force of the riffs and the just the energy. Like, it just booms out of the speakers, and I feel like that was at their kind of apex of like them all like kind of contributing, and just their ability to just shift from one riff to a different time signature. It's very powerful to me. So it's I agree. I mean, it can be very deceptive sometimes. It sounds very simple music when you listen to it, but there's actually quite a lot going on, and it sounds maybe to some modern ears as being a bit hackneyed, but the fact is that they were doing it for the first time. They were actually creating a style. Yeah, it's amazing that they are literally the gods of metal, I guess. I mean, that they did kind of create that sound that so many bands have taken from.
Okay, well, let's have a chance to hear it now. This is Lord of This World from Black Sabbath. So, you get into a podcast by a guy called Joe Rogan, who our listeners may have heard of. For those who haven't, can you tell us what makes him so special and how he influenced your outlook on life?
Yeah, he's a stand-up comedian, and he's also the one of the commentators for the UFC, which is mixed martial arts, like kind of cage fighting. He started this podcast that was basically him and his friend started off recording in their bedroom, and they were just talking about whatever, and it
a bit like this then.
Yeah, exactly like this too. Yeah, and it progressed, and they're at the stage now where they've done over 300 episodes, and they've got such a broad width of guests on there, from comedians to philosophers to scientists to such a wide range of people. But they're talking for 2 to 3 hours, and it's all lighthearted, and it's all kind of they always get stoned before they start the podcast, so it's always kind of free flowing, and you will kind of go off on a tangent about some universe theory, like the simulation theory or something. But it's so much fun, and it's so positive, it's so inspiring and motivational, and it kind of changed me to be more positive and more willing to put in some work to better myself and change. And it started me exercising more and taking an interest in what I eat, and taking multivitamins and putting in your work to be the best that you can be. And it's such a good motivational tool for me, the podcast. You
don't have to be stoned to listen to it then?
No, you don't have to be stoned to listen to it.
But it helps.
But it definitely helps.
So, to your next hero's choice, you've chosen Rage Against the Machine, singing a Bruce Springsteen song. So you're trying to shoehorn two into one, which is fair enough.
Squeeze two in one.
Yeah. It was The Ghost of Tom Joad, which has the lyric, "Wherever there's a cop beating a guy, wherever a hungry newborn baby cries, where there's a fight against the blood and hatred in the air, look for me, Mom, I'll be there." So, I mean, do those lyrics particularly mean a lot to you, or?
It was, it's one of the few examples that I personally have where maybe the cover is better than the original, and I love Bruce Springsteen, and his is an amazing it's his song. It's it's hard to top what the creator made, but when you put those lyrics and then you put it behind Rage Against the Machine, and they've got such a political kind of force, and they, it just vamps up that kind of beaten down energy that those kind of lyrics have, where it's like you're going to rise up and you're going to fight for the just cause, So it
takes it to the next level, really, which obviously the lyrics and the music fusing together to make something a little bit extra, maybe.
Yes, it's an interesting version.
Yeah, well, let's hear it then. This is Rage Against the Machine and The Ghost of Tom Joad. Okay, you tell me in your biog that you care little for alcohol or smoking cigarettes, but you find release with something stronger. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, in our kind of society, there is a heavy focus on drinking on the weekends, and in my life, a lot of people smoke, and that's their kind of their release, their whatever, and there's obvious health risks to those things. But for me, I just didn't enjoy the feeling of smoking tobacco, and I didn't really get too much from being drunk. It didn't really appeal to me. So I kind of went a few years just really not really doing anything. And then I tried cannabis, and that was just like a kind of it just kind of like a aha kind of moment where it's like, oh, okay, this is something I can enjoy, and like it just kind of made me so much more empathetic and loving, and everything is music is just, I would almost go as far as say as you haven't really listened to music unless you've been stoned and you've heard music, because you're hearing at least 30% more of what's going on. You're like, oh, I didn't realize that was there, and then you're also just kind of like in the zone with it. You can it's such an amazing tool for being creative and appreciating art and food and so from there I was like, well, if cigarettes and alcohol are legal and they're killing people by the year, it's why is then cannabis illegal? And why should I go to jail for feeling like this? This shouldn't. It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I think, I mean, you mentioned that. I think there is a movement, there is an attitude that's very slowly beginning to surface around the world. In fact, if you read the right pages, at least the decriminalisation of drugs and taking it out of the criminals' hands would be, although it sounds a crazy idea to some people, would actually be a step in the right direction. And I think it might take a couple of generations, but I think at least you're going to get some countries that are going to be getting towards that kind of situation. Do you think?
Yeah, right? I mean, it's been decriminalised in Portugal for the past 10 years.
Yeah, that always gets mentioned, Portugal.
Yeah, and so it goes against any government that comes forward and says, oh, well, drug use is going to skyrocket if we allow it to be legal, and it's not the case. So in Portugal, they've got 10 years of figures where they can show, look, in fact, if anything, it's a positive. You get less drug use, less addiction, less.
Yeah, well,
so it's. But going back to the legal status of it, just to leave it to the cannabis. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. A government should be able to tell you how you can feel in your own consciousness by using something that grows out of the ground naturally. That's an infringement to me. That's too much control over a person.
Yeah, I mean, I must say, it's not something that I would object to. I mean, I don't think I would go out on day one and start smoking myself. So,
and it's also part of the propaganda that the government puts towards this kind of war on drugs and this umbrella that everything is under the drugs umbrella is that therefore bad. But there's studies after studies showing that the MDMA is beneficial for post-traumatic stress disorder on soldiers coming back from war, and there's studies that show psilocybin mushrooms and LSD is amazingly beneficial to sufferers from child abuse or alcoholism, or because it's been described as like a year's worth of therapy in a few hours. If you have it in the right setting, it then has the certain drugs that have the ability to not just be legal, but to help people, and if that's available, then we should be taking advantage of that.
Yeah, well, I can't say I disagree with you there. We're moving on now to your second song of the podcast, of your own. This is live in the studio. This is Andy Mitchell with Little More Like a Year.
And he felt no shame as they called his name, to throw away the key of flying so free. Where our world may feel a little more like a year. Is this a test of the result of the past 50 years living in a cult where an hour may feel a little more like a year?
The next album that you did was called The Truth Is Unjust. We've already raised the question of marijuana. You say that the weed actually informed the writing of the album. How did that manifest itself?
It was kind of what I was touching on before. It was like my moment of, well, hang on, if I've been lied to about this cannabis and then what else is fishy? So that kind of led me into a variety of, well, let's just look at things as objectively as you can. You know, there's no reason, therefore, that everything you're told just because it's from an official is true. So therefore, one of the examples, I bookend the album with the voice of Graham Hancock, who's an author, and one of his most popular books is Fingerprints of the Gods, where he basically kind of throws a spanner in the works of ancient history. I mean, he kind of dials it back to stating that there's perhaps civilizations that were around 10,000, 12,000 years ago.
Is that a bit like Von Daniken used to do? Chariots of the Gods and that kind of thing? About spaceships coming down in ancient history? And
it's a little more based on actual science than that. I mean, he goes, one of the points is the water precipitation around the enclosure of the Sphinx, which is from rainfall, which means for there to be that much, it has to have, the last time there was that much rainfall in that area was 10,000 years ago. So it has to therefore push their official figures back to that point. But they don't accept that because that then throws out everything that they're teaching. It throws out, it could essentially throw out a professor who's been working on that field for 25 years. So what I was getting at was you start to realize that nothing is as it says it is.
So they're distorting history and fooling everybody. And
it's not maliciously fooling, but it's at the end of the day, it's all humans. If someone's going to come across and tell you you're wrong after you've been working on it for 30 years, of course you're going to hold on to that with your both hands and fight against it for a little bit.
Okay. So the music that you've got, the Truth Is Unjust album, and the several other pieces we've mentioned before, are these available for download or is it?
Yeah, it's all my music is available for free at my website.
Okay. Do you want to give the website out?
Yeah, it's www.andymitchell.me.
That's good. And of course you've got Facebook page.
Yeah, the Facebook page.
And there'll be everything linked from there as well.
Yeah, everything's all
cool.
all linked in and whatnot.
Excellent. Right. We're on to your final influence, the third one, and it's Pink Floyd, Echoes Part 1, and it's a particular version. It's the live version at Pompeii where they all stood around and they had all the equipment in a circle and they had the cameras tracking round. It was a very, very effective original presentation.
Yeah. I mean, it was right after they'd recorded Dark Side of the Moon. So they go to this location and they play their songs in what's like a huge empty amphitheater, and this Echoes is the first one on the film, and it's right when they're, to me, at their peak, where they're working as a unit and what they're achieving in that moment where it breaks down into this where they're just kind of riffing and jamming for about 4 or 5 minutes, and it's outstanding how they just all in their own kind of individual, they're all excelling, they're all kind of drum filling and soloing on the bass, and there's organ coming in, and they're all individually at their peak, but it's also, you know, a culmination that's exceeding way more than anything they could achieve by themselves. You know, it's like another level.
Anyway, we've rattled on. We'll crack on with Pink Floyd, which we've been discussing. Echoes Part 1, live from Pompeii. Right, so we're more or less up to date with your particular story. And what kind of thing are you planning for the next 12 months? Have you got something lined up that you're going to look at?
Yeah, I mean, once I finished the last album, you know, I was kind of, well, you know, there's another album. It was kind of starting to already get kind of like, well, what am I going to do differently this time?
Yeah.
And right around that time, I had some experience with LSD and some magic mushrooms, and that was such a powerful life changer that it ended up completely changing my approach to what I was doing with my music. You know, it's hard to put in words what the experience is like if you can do it in the right environment and if you treat it with respect. And, you know, what I was saying earlier about it being like a year worth of therapy in a few hours, it's going to change your life or your perspective. And for me, it opened me up to be far more spiritual, feeling that, I mean, I never believed in God, and just to have that religious experience that kind of confirms that there is a kind of higher energy at play. There is something that's there that you don't understand, that's loving and, you know, can teach you and improve you, and everything is so clear, and everything is, you know, it made me want to take care of my physical body, because that, you know, a lot of people, me included, would just eat rubbish food, and to open yourself up and wipe your ego and then see what's really up.
Well, I was going to talk a bit about that, but before we do that, I wanted to squeeze in your last hero track, which is Creedence Clearwater Revival, Run Through the Jungle. I mean, when I hear the words Creedence Clearwater Revival, I think of sort of a southern swamp rock, sort of boogie band, good time.
Yeah.
That's maybe a little bit different to the other choices you've made. Is it just sort of a good time kind of sound that you like from them?
Yeah, I mean, what you were describing there is exactly what I feel when I listen to them or hear their name. I just love the imagery in my head when you play their songs. And
okay, so Creedence Clearwater Revival. This is Run Through the Jungle. We've already discussed this a little bit, and that is LSD, magic mushrooms, which you claim gives you a sense of a higher energy at play, and also gives you a love for everything, an intensity, a clarity. Some would argue that that's a load of hippie bullshit, but that's, some would say. I'm not me. Some people would say. I mean, to me, it sounds as if you're having a quasi-religious experience. So you've already touched on that. Does it take you onto another level?
Before anyone could have a say on that, I would say you have to have experienced it to have a judgment on whether it's real or not, or what's happening when you're under the influence of a psychedelic. But I mean, for me, it definitely was confirmation that there is, you know, so much that we don't understand. That's, you know, not that we're being watched or things like that, but there is kind of energies that in consciousness that's you know, it changed my perspective on consciousness and how we as beings are. It kind of made me approach it as like we're like radio receivers of like kind of the greater consciousness. So I mean, if you were to break open a radio, you know, you're not going to find any music in it. It's when it turns on and picks up that signal is when the music comes out. So it's like the same for you know, the person. You know, you can break the human down right down to the every part of the brain. We haven't found where consciousness is. Yeah. So it's to me, it made me open to that idea. Well, maybe we are like kind of receivers that when we're turned on, we're picking up some kind of greater kind of consciousness or.
Well, I think we've seen people like John Lennon and McCartney, when they've discussed about going on trips, there's this sort of attitude that, well, we've done it and we more or less know the secret. And I think that's what you're saying, is that there's those people who've taken it and those people who haven't taken it. And it's only those people who've taken it that can actually say, well, yeah, we know what it means. So we know the secrets behind it. And I mean, I think it comes out in the music quite a lot.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point that's often left out when people talk about, you know, the great music of the 60s and the 70s is, especially the 60s, is how much LSD influenced that sound and that kind of free-flowing, you know, you called it hippie bullshit, but that kind of love.
I was just quoting you.
Yeah, that kind. But I know what you mean. That kind of free love kind of feeling. But to me, it's very closely linked into what happens when I'm making music. Is you just kind of sit down and the song is kind of coming through you. When you're on LSD, it's like you've turned the frequency to an even.
Up to 11.
Yeah, like you've dialed it in, and now suddenly you're completely taken from some kind of greater collective. So,
I'd just like to say, if law enforcement are listening, there are no drugs on the premises. We've had them all. We've taken them all. There's none left, or is there? We'll never know. Talking of writing your own music and being influenced by substances, the third track that you're going to do for us now is Law of Entropy. I mean, do you want to tell us anything about the song?
It was just a kind of collective of different kind of ideas. I mean, there's a verse in there that's kind of based on a little bit on Nikola Tesla, who was an inventor in the 19th century, who was one of his main ideas was to try and harness the electricity that's kind of all around us in the ionosphere, in the atmosphere, and kind of provide everyone with free electricity. And you know, the government or whoever at the time kind of stepped in and said, "Whoa, you're not going to be giving away any free electricity. You know, you can knock that on the head."
Well, we could do with him now, couldn't we? With the way things are, with wind farms and that kind of thing, we need some free electricity. Okay, well, let's hear Law of Entropy. This is Andy Mitchell with the final song of the podcast of his own, Law of Entropy.
Desert heat, where wonder's hard to find, there's a man who fights with an inch of his life against the land that swallowed him whole. But it's all instinct, and it's all instinct. For a fighter's punch is all you got against the law of entropy. It's 1885, and lightning might strike twice. For inventions have been made that could change today, but greed stole them away. And it's all instinct, and it's all instinct. For a fighter's punch is all you got, it's the law of entropy. So please survive. I think I may lose myself into you. This way collide. Well, this moment seems like an infinite dream. So please survive. I think I may lose myself into you as we collide. Well, this moment seems like an infinite dream to me.
Okay, as far as live performances go, I know from your bio that you've only just started to explore live work. You played at Mink's Scouting for Milk event, is that right?
Scouting for Mink, yes.
Scouting for Mink. Oh, it's my typing is terrible here. Scouting for Mink, and you played 3 songs. How did that go?
Yeah, it was. They just recently started just before Christmas. It's a really good night for anyone who's up and coming and trying to play live.
Yeah, I think when you're a singer-songwriter, if you're sat at home recording and you do quite a bit of overdubs and harmonies, when you go out to do a live presentation of the same song and it's just you and a guitar, you basically have to rearrange it or strip it down.
Yeah, I mean, it's I suppose it's very much reflective of today's music, where a lot of it is I mean, you can perfect everything in the studio now. I mean, you can make a horrible singer an amazing singer with some tricks and some.
Anyway, I think we're just about out of time now. Andy Mitchell, thank you very much for coming in.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, and I hope everyone's enjoyed the songs, and we'll see you next time.